Bonjour à tous, j'ai le plaisir aujourd'hui de recevoir Scott Horton, intellectuel, homme de radio, auteur à succès connu pour sa critique particulièrement charpentée de la politique étrangère américaine. Scott Horton est également le directeur de l'Institut libertarien américain. Scott Horton, thank you so much for taking time to speak with me. Good morning, for starters.
Good morning to you too, or afternoon, I guess, where you are.
Yeah. And if that's okay with you, let's jump right in. What's your take on President Trump's address last night?
Well, I mean, on the bright side, he did not announce a massive new ground escalation. And on a crucial question of whether he was going to try to play out some crazy Hollywood movie and drop all the special operations forces into Isfahan to try to seize the uranium hexafluoride gas in its caskets or whatever refined kind of metal, which apparently, you know, he did ask the Pentagon to draw up a real plan to do that. And thankfully, they must have advised him to never mind that. So he said, well, we can see what they're doing from the sky, and they better not try to restart what they're doing. So that's the good news, because I mean there was an idea, and you can make it up in your own head if you think like a Hollywood director. Then it's easy to imagine. Yeah, what you do is you drop in all the Delta Force and the SEALs in the middle, and then the Rangers around them, and then the 82nd Airborne around them, and then you fly A-10s in a big circle to suppress any ground fire, and then they build a runway and land C-130s full of ground moving equipment, and they spend a month and a half screwing around trying to dig up boulders and go and find caskets of uranium wherever they might happen to be buried, and then fly out of there. Meanwhile, they're adjacent to a major Iranian city, and they're in the middle of a country of 100 million people, the size of two Texases and a half. So, in the movie, they all die except like 4 guys make it out. You know what I mean? Like, this is a very, very bad idea.
I know what you mean.
So, sorry. Now, the bad news is that essentially he's trapped. We have this thing in America that libertarians do, and I really should read books about it. I can't explain it very well, but it's called public choice theory. It sounds kind of clunky, but the idea is that the public choices, like by government on behalf of everyone, they're made by private people. And you don't just become a selfless angel when you get a government job. And you don't just disregard all of your own interests in favor of the greater national good, especially when you're an extremely powerful politician and you want more and more power for yourself. So in our case, and I'm not arguing for parliamentary democracy instead overall, but I'm just saying in this particular case, it might be beneficial if we could just call a vote of no confidence and replace this guy right now, so that whoever's in charge of figuring out how to extricate us from this mess is not the guy whose fault it is for getting us into it. And he can be polite and just say, okay, here's what we're going to do, right? Where if you're Trump and it's all your fault, you got to find a way to get out that you can make it look good for you, right? And that's not even if you don't have a megalomaniac, you know, narcissistic kind of a clownish character like Trump in there, but for any president, they have a huge interest in finding, you know, peace with honor, as Nixon would say, in the midst of losing Vietnam. But there has to be a way to get out of this where we can still hold our head up, or nuke them, right? Because we're not going to just say, we failed, oh no, and then turn around and leave. Because no matter how true that is, well, look at Afghanistan, for example. They knew all along that they could not escalate that war and so-called win it, remake that society, and whatever. Forget all the stipulations, what would have had to happen for that war to be a success. They knew it could not be, but they kept it for 20 years. They kept it. even after getting humiliated and kicked out of Iraq by the people they helped win, they still stay in Afghanistan. Then they double, triple down in Afghanistan instead of leaving there too. And so it's the same thing for Ukraine. Oh, this is going to be easy. They said Russia has the second most powerful army in the world. Well, it turns out they have the second most powerful army in Ukraine. Ha, ha, ha. We're going to kick them all the way out of all of Ukraine, all of the Donbass, and including Crimea, too. It's going to be easy. Those Russians apparently are really easy to defeat. All you have to do is give Ukrainians some money. And then they can't just say, well, boy, that didn't work. And the Russians have done nothing but take territory the whole time ever since then, albeit slowly, but they've completely destroyed Ukrainian society. They've killed hundreds of thousands of people, maybe more, and they've wrecked Ukraine's economy and scattered their population throughout the world. And all for what? A strategic defeat that's cost Americans and Europeans far more than it's cost the Russians in terms of basic dollar, ruble amounts. And so that's the trap, right? Is that Donald Trump is the Joe Biden of this situation. And he got us into this thing. He doesn't really have a good way to get out. So that's why he says, well, it's going to be a few more weeks, because he's trying to figure out, I don't know, something to redefine success so that he can find a way to quit. But see, the Iranians aren't going to let him. And they have said this explicitly, that we're going to keep this war going until we feel like quitting, until we feel like the point's been made. You better not ever mess with us again. And so, the comparison has been made by some to the Iran-Iraq war when Jimmy Carter gave Saddam Hussein the green light to invade Iran. First of all, that solidified the power of the somewhat precarious new Ayatollah regime at that time.
Indeed.
As everyone rallied around the government to protect from the foreign invader. And also, they took major losses in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands, and they kept fighting for 9 years. And as one smart Twitterer pointed out, the Iranians have basically retaken all of their territory from Saddam Hussein's forces by 1982, or maybe it was 83. And then 84. They kept fighting and refused to negotiate even at all, really, until 88. So they wanted to just keep fighting, right, to prove their point. And so, and right now, there's a lot of propaganda going around. Take somewhat grain of salt, but it sure looks like from credible reporting, right, that there's some extraordinary percentage, maybe like a significant majority of all the missiles fired from Iran are now getting through in Israel.
I've heard 80%. I've heard 80% at least.
Yeah, so boy, a number like that, I tend to err on the side of more conservative, but I really don't know. But the fact is that, look, the fact is Donald Trump should not have done this. He should not have let himself get talked into this stupid thing, because it's like when I was a kid growing up, there was this gag on TV all the time where somebody gets stuck in quicksand and they just sink and couldn't figure out how to get out. And it turns out, I don't know where you find this quicksand. There's not much of it anywhere, but as a metaphor, it's great. It's just one of those things where, especially that that's what it is. Don't go dive head first into that. And like your friend told you it's going to be easy, but I don't know. We know that the Pentagon, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff put it in the Wall Street Journal 2 days before the war, that I told them that this could be really rough and that they got a lot of missiles. They got more outgoing missiles than we've got interceptors. So end of the day, boy, if this whole regime change thing doesn't work in a snap, then I don't know what's going to happen. And then what's happened? They hit every one of our bases all up and down the coast. They've hit $1 zillion worth of economic targets, and then projecting out into the future. I don't know if this is really true, but I read a thing this morning said that Abu Dhabi is a ghost town right now, that Dubai is a ghost town, that, all of the tourism and all the, whatever nightlife and travel and all of the kind of hustle and bustle of those major cities is, completely on hold. And so, never mind all the oil refineries that have been torched, the ports, and all of the things, the economic damage going forward here, and all of this stuff. And again, with Trump, I think seeing no easy way out that he can still make himself look good. So that's a pretty bad portent, I guess.
But what do you think made him shift from no more war for sand to let's go for it?
Well, I mean,
if he ever actually meant that, of course.
It's a few things, right? Look, he never meant the first part about, being a peace president and all of that. The bottom line, if you're willing to read between the lines the whole time, Trump's biggest flaw in everything is Zionism. He's completely pwned by the lobby, and especially in the form of Sheldon and Miriam Adelson, Allison, I guess it is. And now Sheldon is dead, but the wife and the husband previously, and now the widow, have given hundreds of millions of dollars to him. And he's just their pal. Like, he believes in their stuff. His brightest, most capable assistant is his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, not his own sons, but the guy who married his daughter, who he hires to do everything, and he's tied at the hip to the Likud. He might as well be a neoconservative, although that's a different thing. But essentially, that means American Likudniks, basically, right? And
we've got the same in France.
Yeah. So this is it's been his problem in his first term. And he's always said, which, by the way, W. Bush and Barack Obama and Joe Biden all said, incredibly so, even Obama too, that if Iran breaks out and tries to make an atom bomb, I will bomb them first, dude. I will not let that happen. They'll die before they're done. And they all swore that. But the only thing is, once you're in that rhetorical trap, then it's just a matter of how do you define them making a bomb? Because, of course, the Tel Aviv interpretation of this has always been, if they have nuclear or anything, they're making a bomb. And there's some truth to that, in the sense that, a kernel of it, in the sense that Iran was making sure that, yes, they had proven to the world that they had mastered the fuel cycle. They know how to enrich uranium. They can transform it from metal to gas, enrich it, and then turn it back to metal again, make fuel rods or warheads if they had to. And so, but that was a latent deterrent. And, the War Party says that, no, because they're just buying their time until then they're going to make nukes, and then they're going to definitely use them against us and all of this stuff. And so we have to go now instead of later. And that's the preemptive thing. But in fact, no. I mean, previously, standoff was America saying, if you make a nuke, we'll bomb you, or you try to make a nuke, you break out toward a nuke, we'll bomb you. And then they would say, hey, don't bomb us because we're not making a nuke. But we might make a nuke if you bomb us. So that was the standoff, and that was the status quo, and that was really what that was actually the status quo since W. Bush and into early Obama. All the Obama deal of 2015 really did was it rolled back Iran's program in some ways, and it expanded the inspections regime. And so it wasn't perfect, but the thing is, they'd already forsworn nuclear weapons anyway. They weren't making them anyway, and here they forswore them again. And if America had real problems with any kind of what they think would be secret nuclear development, they had the right to search anywhere, including as long as they could get a majority vote on the UN Security Council. But unlike a normal UNSC resolution where any one power can veto with a no vote, this was simple majority rules. So if America can get Britain and France to vote with us, then China and Russia are outvoted every time, and we can search whatever we want. And those were within the rules and all of that. Trump's only real gripe, never mind all Netanyahu's propaganda, but his only real gripe in 2018 about the Obama nuclear deal was that it had these sunset provisions. And, he can make up whatever complaint at a microphone, but like the only actual criticism was some of these restrictions were going to expire in 5 or 10 or 15 years. Mm-hmm. Well, but that when you already have a deal by your predecessor, the thing to do there is to come in and maybe even play hardball, but try to go back to the table and say, listen, I don't like this deal. It's my predecessor's deal, but it is a deal. You made it with the country. I want to improve it. Let's improve it. And after all, Obama never lived up to his side of the deal, which was sanctions relief. He barely any sanctions relief whatsoever. People make such a big deal about $1 billion in cash. That was Iran's money that they were trying to buy weapons with back in 1979 when Jimmy Carter stole it from them in the revolution and never gave them their weapons for the money.
We did that too, you know, because most of the Iranian nuclear capacity stemmed from
and look, I hate to give,
and they actually bought also for 1 billion French francs at that time the right to access enriched uranium manufactured was something like 120 kilometers from where I live in France at Tricastin, and 1971, boom, revolution, and of course neither the uranium was delivered nor the money reimbursed.
Right, and in fact, that's an important part of this history because one of the things in the negotiations was the Americans were trying to get the Iranians to agree to ship their uranium to France. But the French had already screwed them on a deal just like that before, which is just what you're talking about. So they insisted that no, it would go to the Russians, and the Russians would turn in a few rods and send it back.
Which so anyway, we French are going to get back because most of our uranium is coming from Rosatom, no matter what.
Right. So anyway, point being that here's the thing. Before the Obama deal, we already had the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and Iran was already a member of the NPT and had a safeguards agreement with the IAEA that inspected all their facilities and guaranteed that they weren't diverting uranium to military purposes. But the thing is, the war party in America and obviously in Israel, but also even in Europe, they just sort of pretended 90% of the time to not know that they had this giant treaty and that there was such a thing as an Iranian safeguards agreement or any of this. They just acted like Iran's nuclear program was illicit, was a weapons program, was, you know, in violation of all their international obligations, as Obama would claim over and over again. And so there really was a threat of war. And I know, see, I always thought the Israelis were bluffing at this time, but there were people in the Obama government who thought that they were not, that Netanyahu was determined to even drag America into a war with Iran. So people say that Obama was trying to make an alliance with Iran, tilt back toward Iran against Saudi and Israel in the region and this kind of thing. That's not true. And I hate the guy. I'm not sticking up for him at all, but I'm just saying the reality of what he was doing was he was simply just trying to take the threat of war off the table by saying, listen, okay, not only are their facilities inspected, but they're extra special super inspected. Okay, shut up about it. That was all it was. That was what the JCPOA was. And it worked, by the way. They had to kind of stop pretending that, I think there might be a secret weapons program in Iran. It was as though they had just signed the NPT and had just signed a safeguards agreement at all. It was essentially the way the thing was treated. And so it ultimately was superfluous, but necessary politically at that time. And then when they tore up the treaty, the JCPOA, when Trump tore up the JCPOA, Iran stayed in it. Because it was a deal with the rest of the UN Security Council, too. It wasn't just a deal with the United States. And they stayed in it until the ongoing assassination and sabotage campaigns inside Iran made them finally quit that and start enriching. And in fact, by the way, they may have only actually officially quit the JCPOA after the attack last June. Because, see, inside the JCPOA deal, it's said in there that if America breaks the deal, that Iran can stop abiding by certain strictures in the deal and restrictions in the deal and stay within the deal. It wouldn't be breaking the deal for them to break parts of it, because that's agreed beforehand. They're allowed to essentially raise their limits of their stockpile, raise the number of centrifuges that are enriching and whatever. I forget the exact stipulations, but they're all in there. And I say strictures when I mean stipulations. I don't know why. So that was actually within the deal, that they could stop abiding by certain aspects of the deal if America broke it first. So Trump very well could have gotten back in the deal, and he could have played hardball diplomacy. He could have severely restricted their program. And in fact, as long as I'm on this, after the attack last June, they did not probably dig all the way down deep into those facilities and completely destroy all the centrifuges.
Well, it's just impossible anyway. They built to resist a nuclear strike. So
they're very
hundred meters of granite Go for it. No, bunker
But it doesn't
busters,
matter,
no
though,
effect.
because here's the thing, though. What they were able to do was collapse all the tunnels. Those guys got to breathe down there, and they got to be able to walk down there. They got to be able to take an elevator down there or whatever. So all of that stuff was bombed. And all estimates, and there are open source intelligence estimates, and then we have reports about the American intelligence community's conclusions, is that the Iranians had not lifted a finger toward restoring the facilities at Ordo or Natanz. Those guys are buried alive down there, and nobody's coming for them. I mean, it's over. And so when Trump said that their program was obliterated, no, the centrifuges are not destroyed, but yes, they're basically inaccessible. And the same thing at Isfahan. Crucially, they destroyed the conversion facility where you convert the metal to uranium hexafluoride gas and then convert it back into metal again, which that can be recreated, but at great expense and effort. And so essentially, he did set their nuclear program back at least a few years. The problem from their point of view, is that Iran's got uranium mines, and they know how to refine the ore, and they know how to enrich it to convert it to uranium hexafluoride gas, and they know how to make aluminum centrifuges and to create cascades of them and enrich this gas to higher percentages U-235. And you can't take that away. They can try to assassinate their way out of that, but this is 1940s technology, man. You can't undo it. And so a couple things there. So Trump called their bluff, and on one hand, really estimated their ability to make nuclear weapons or nuclear anything. On the other hand, he gave them every incentive to make nuclear bombs now. And then especially after this war, killing the Ayatollah, the conservative old Ayatollah, who was more cautious and said that God said you're not allowed to make weapons of mass destruction. They got rid of him and replaced him, unlike what Trump claims, that he has more compliant people in power now. Seems much more likely he's going to have hardliners in there, and much more likely that they'll try to make nukes now.
Well, he's not going to have necessarily religious hardliner, because Khamenei was not what we can call a religious hardliner. He did let I know a bit Iran. Just a second, I'm gonna have to. Sorry, you hear the dog? He's getting into hardliners, not religiously, but definitely in terms of nationalism. But then again, it's Iran. What did you expect? I mean, same thing with Afghanistan. You go to Afghanistan, you figure out pretty quickly that Afghans, I'm going to tell you that, well, I don't care, I'm Afghan. So get off. I mean, we like foreigners, okay, but I mean, occupation, get out. What can Trump do to get out of this quagmire? If there is anything you can do.
The answer to that is just quit. He's not going to say sorry, but just declare victory and come home. That's it. And then, I mean, in reality, if he really followed through on that, pilots, get in your planes, fly west. Admiral, sail those boats away from there, and really demonstrate that, it's over all right, to a severe degree. Then maybe the Iranians would continue to insist on getting their last word in and get some more licks in on Israel and whatever. But then ultimately, at least that would shift the burden onto them to be the reasonable ones and stop. And there are plenty of diplomats in the world. They don't have to come from North America at all, dude. Send some Swiss guy in there to settle this and reopen the international waters of the Persian Gulf and whatever. I mean, the real danger here is that, and who knows how this is going to play out, but all of the consequences of this thing. We had, the status quo 6 weeks ago was American bases all up and down that Gulf. American naval ships going where they want, patrolling those sea lanes and to whatever end, preventing the pirates from taking over or whatever it is, preventing Iran from taking it over, to then starting this war to destroy and cripple and regime change their country and everything. And now they have, decimated all of the bases, but at least they've hit all of the bases.
They're all unoperational. That's for sure. I mean, not
and they
only that, but also
destroyed the fleet base in Bahrain is ruined.
yeah,
right.
And radar. I mean, long range early warning detection systems. I mean,
I read that they're not really
radars,
hitting
1 million each.
Yeah, I read that they're not really hitting the Al Udeid air base in Qatar that much because Qatar is refusing to allow the United States to fly missions out of there.
That is correct. It's
so,
hilarious.
in other words, these bases are completely superfluous. They're now proven. They were like this huge, like a hologram of power, right? It was this illusion of projected power out there, and then bluff call. Talk about bluff call, like on America on their nuclear program. Boy, they call the bluff on America, bringing their country with military bases when they can hit every one of them from Erbil to Oman and to Muscat. Yes. So, Dingle, so now, and they're like charging a toll, and there's like different categories of people have to pay, different categories of countries have to pay different prices to be able to get through the Strait of Hormuz and all that. So I don't know how arrogant they're going to be in the aftermath of this.
I don't
but
think
Robert
that's not.
They're really going to inherit a position of real dominance here.
But that's not in the Iranian culture to be arrogant. But what I'm hearing, what I've heard from several sources in the Middle East, pretty private to this matter, this morning, is that you've got several Gulf monarchies through very stealthy back channels now telling the Iranians, guys, okay, we'll give you some of the stuff you want. Kind of, we're going to kick the Americans out of the Persian Gulf, and we may pay the reparations that you're asking for. But please stop. If that happens, that would be quite funny, wouldn't it?
If you read the American list of demands and the Iranian list of demands, there's no compromising there, right? They're both on this. Almost like Russia and Ukraine. Both sides want to keep fighting for their different reasons. So I'm very pessimistic about fruitful negotiations. My attitude is just forget it. Just turn your back on the thing. Why do we need an agreement with them? Just stop bombing them. And all our guys are over the horizon anyway. So just quit it. You know what I mean? Evacuate whoever's left at Al Udeid base and get our guys out of Jordan and whatever, and just forget it. Who needs the Middle East anyway? All that oil, Osama bin Laden. In 1997, Osama bin Laden did an interview with Abdulbari Atwan from Al-Quds Al-Arabi, the paper in London. And he says about the oil, he goes, "What am I going to do? Drink it?" So there's a bin Laden joke for you. You know what I mean? Point being that it would be for sale if the head terrorist of them all was the king of Arabia. The oil would still be for sale on the global market because it's worthless in the ground. That's what it's for, turning to money. What are you talking about? So in other words, who gives a damn about the Middle East? Like, good luck to them. But America doesn't have to be the dominant force in the Middle East. I mean, think about the mythology that they had to build up. Saddam Hussein was going to invade not just Kuwait, but then Saudi, and then Iran again, and then he was going to monopolize all Middle Eastern oil and then turn into the new Hitler and next march on Paris.
Of course.
No, like, you have to be completely stupid. You have to come up with extraordinary lies or be extraordinarily dumb enough to believe them all, to think that there's real purpose behind America for, being dominant there, to prevent anyone else from being dominant there.
But that's the Israeli playbook. I mean, the only reason, even Marco Rubio admitted it, confessed to it, started this war on the behest, or at the behest, of Israel. So is there any chance that after what was about turning a disaster into a catastrophe, we may see a form of reset of the U.S.-Israel relationship anytime soon?
Wow, that's the real trick, isn't it? You know, the thing of it is that sentiment in the United States of America among the population has changed drastically over the last couple of years because of the war, the slaughter in Gaza, and then now this. By the way, on the Rubio thing, I'm not so sure I buy the idea that Netanyahu essentially blackmailed Trump into this and said, I'm going to start the war and drag you in. Now, there were plans to do that during W. Bush. And as I said, there was a real threat that that could happen during Obama. So I'm not saying that that's impossible. It's clearly not impossible. However, I think Trump wanted to do this. I think, in fact, I didn't really answer you earlier when you asked like how he did this. I think they flattered him into it. I think they just told him, "This is the path to greatness, dude. You got to do something big." And this is going to
give them a Nobel Peace Prize by waging war.
Yeah, well, and there's an easy narrative if you're a big dummy that says, "Listen, man, we're just going to run the board and fix everything." Just, right before he's inaugurated, we just got rid of the horrible Assad in Syria. Now we're going to get rid of them commies in Venezuela and in Cuba. We're going to get rid of the Ayatollah in Iran, and we're going to make a better world, man. George W. Bush had no follow through. You got to go after the real bad guys, the worst bad guys, where they thought they were safe in Tehran. And so, what are you, Barack Obama, with his little pansy red line that he backed down from and let Assad live when he had every opportunity to put al-Qaeda in there, like Joe Biden eventually did? And so you can't back down now. You got to follow through. And then, I mean, look, we all know who we're talking about here, Donald Trump. They told him that, look, man, forget George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. You're going to be like a biblical figure. You're going to be, it would be like if Franklin Roosevelt had invaded Europe in 1935 and prevented the Holocaust from ever happening. That's what you're going to do. You are going to go down in history like King Cyrus, the great deliverer and savior of the Jews. So never mind Abraham Lincoln or FDR or something like that. You're going to be a world historical great figure on a biblical level for the rest of the history of all of mankind. Boy, are you handsome. And he went, wow, you really think so? And all I got to do is start this war, huh? And like, yeah, it is that easy. And that is how, look, I guarantee you, there's a national intelligence estimate in Israel that says just flatter him. That's it.
Yeah.
We did an in-depth psychological study and we decided to tell him he's tall and strong and handsome and wise and brave and wealthy and great. He really likes that stuff. Tell him nice shoes. And he'll be like, wow, you think so? You like my shoes, huh? I mean, he's really is like that.
Let me get you some most probably oversized, like he did to all his cabinets, because I believe because he was tired of people wearing sneakers, but that's another story.
Yeah. So, John McCain, Bill Kristol used to tell John McCain, wow, you remind me of Theodore Roosevelt. And then John McCain would like swoon and faint in his arms and be like, who do you want me to kill, Bill? And it's just that worked on these guys. And, Trump is twice or three times the egomaniac even John McCain was, which sounds impossible as I say it. I don't know. Maybe tied. But yeah, that's all the way on the spectrum of egomaniac, both of them. And so, yeah, that kind of thing works. In fact, Trump said yesterday, he does say the truth out loud a lot. Yesterday, he says, if people flatter me enough, I'll do whatever they want, even if they're bad guys. If they're nice to me, then I'll do it. I'll do whatever they say. He said that yesterday at a press conference or at a podium it was like a private event, but they filmed it anyway and then released it anyway. Like, okay, yeah, that's what it takes. So Netanyahu he had an order out to all of his men. Just flatter him. If Rand Paul goes golfing with Trump, he's going to be like, Mr. President, that one thing that you're doing, you really shouldn't do or whatever. But when he goes golfing with Lindsey Graham tells him, you're the greatest person ever, blah, 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 blah. All you got to do is kill him. Finish him off. You can do it. And you know what I mean? And I think he just fell for that. I'm not trying to absolve him in any way. I mean, listen, if you are the president of the United States, no one else is. There's only one guy gets to sit in that chair behind that desk and call those shots. He didn't have to do this at all. I don't care what kind of, hypnosis they did on him or whatever. That doesn't have to work. That only works on the weak-minded. You know what I mean? You have to let yourself be influenced by these people. So, but, it's the same thing with W. Bush. He used to talk about how stupid W. Bush was, and people would really take that wrong. Like I was involving him, and I was saying that essentially he was such an automaton that he's not responsible for his own actions. It was like, hell yes, he's responsible. The fact that he's stupid doesn't make him not evil, and doesn't make the results of his actions any less absolutely horrific. But, you know what I mean? Like, take W. Bush. He didn't mean well. The guy's a horrible son of a bitch in every way. Absolutely horrible person, and with the worst of intentions, obviously. But like, what if he did mean well? How much difference does that make? You know what I mean? It doesn't. But the fact is, he didn't mean well, and he was stupid. Really stupid. And the decisions that he made were completely idiotic and based on the advice of people who also were completely lost and had no idea what they were talking about. So, you know what I mean? It's like you and me and our friends, we go do a bank heist and a bunch of people get killed and then we all get caught. Well, that's not how it was supposed to happen. But you know what I mean? Just because we botched it doesn't mean that, like, no, but see, if we gotten away with it, it would have been great. You know what I mean?
I'm old enough to remember that, yeah. So what do you think the impact on the midterms will be? Because that's also pretty interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Democrats are so horrible. I'm sure. Here's the deal. I'm no expert on all the demographics and whatever. The midterms always are depressed burnout anyway. Trump is extremely polarizing. And a huge part of his base is now just totally over it. Inflation ain't ever going away. And so prices are just out of control. And then he has this sneering contempt for the people who supported him. He said, prices are so high right now that people can't get in a house. Younger people can't get in a house. Again, he blurts out the truth all the time. Prices are so high, younger people can't get in a house. But if we change the rules to really make it a lot easier to build a lot more houses and drive down the price, well, that will hurt the net worth of all the old baby boomers. And I don't want to do that to them because, of course, they've been forced into that being their safest investment is their artificially appreciating house prices, right? Is their only safety net, and he takes that away from them. That is going to hurt them. So then he concludes with, so for the young people who just aren't willing to work hard enough, I'm not going to do anything. Screw them. That's their problem. When he's the one who started with, no, the prices are artificially high because of government constraints on the development of new homes or whatever. He started with that. It's not that they won't work hard enough. It's that the earnings to home price ratio has never been more out of whack. And then he just blames them anyway. Screw you guys. Everybody under 70. Well, okay. That's a lot of people.
That's kind of 75% of Americans or more. 18.
And he goes, what do you mean you're still talking about this Epstein thing? Yeah, because you said you're going to release all files and then you didn't. And you had to be made to with a supermajority veto-proof vote in the Congress, which was not because that was what Congress wanted, but because that was what the American people absolutely demanded. He had absolutely no choice but to give in to that thing. He had a veto-proof supermajority in both houses and was forced to release these documents that, never mind like the craziest conspiracy type takes on them, they absolutely show a web of criminality and corruption of this international network of powerful gangsters in all of these institutions who at the very least are criminals and at the very least are just not special people at all. They're just powerful, but they don't stand out as particularly intelligent or
smart,
particularly accomplished.
They have no knowledge of the world. No, they're a bunch of hack, as I said to Bill.
And he
You're a hack man.
That's right. And he clearly was getting a lot of people laid and had networks of, so-called models that he could bring in from Eastern Europe to please whoever he needed, apparently whatever age and all that. And Trump was trying to suppress that. We all know why, because that was his network of friends. Epstein and Bill Clinton and all these guys, these are Donald Trump's people from the time when all of the worst of this was going on. And so people got really, jaded by that. It's such an obvious betrayal. You know what it is? It's on the level. It's basically equivalent to like Joe Biden being senile, and then they tell you that he's fine. We're like, listen, I'm sorry, but my auntie and her friends all know that he's too old for this. You don't have to know anything about politics. You don't have to know anything about anything to just look at Joe Biden and say, no, man, this guy is too out of it, too old, can't do it. And they just lie to you. It's like on that level equivalent of BS in your face. You know what I mean? The Epstein thing, forget about it. What do you mean you're still paying attention to that? People are like, no, man, I'm sorry. It's too quick for you to lie to me and betray your promise about that stuff. And then the wars too. W. Bush in 2000 had mumbled some BS in a debate with Al Gore about, well, we ought to have a humble foreign policy. Like, he never swore off interventionism at all. He's George Bush's son, for God's sake. He was just like, in fact, the end of that statement was, that way they'll be more accepting of us when we intervene. Like, yeah, okay, of course. But people really took that seriously. However, though, then September 11th happened. So his excuse for forgetting about all that was pretty obvious and whatever. And he exploited it to the nth degree, of course. But Donald Trump didn't just mumble a little something about a humble foreign policy. Donald Trump got up there on the side of the Empire State Building like King Kong, beating his chest and crying, I am the greatest peacemaker in the history of guys who ever ended conflicts ever anywhere. Look at me. I hate war. I hate war more than anyone hates war. I end wars. I don't start them. I don't fight them. Never mind all those Afghans and Yemenis and Iraqis and Syrians and Somalis I killed last time around, and Palestinians. But boy, this time, no new wars. You know me. And he proclaimed that like no president has ever proclaimed anything. So people like, wow, he sure is like making a big promise there. I guess I have to believe a promise that big, and a lot of people did believe it, and that was why they supported him. And now they feel so betrayed because it's just too obvious. You can't climb down from that. And there was no September 11th in the meantime. Everybody knows September 11th here was just Netanyahu came to town and just lobbied the man into giving in. But then, and I'm sorry, because you asked me how to get out. I'm sorry, I forgot what the last was about.
That was about the primaries. Okay, now let's see that.
Yeah, the primaries. So look, but the thing is, the Democrats are just horrible. I mean, advantage them. But like, I could see a lot of people refusing to protest vote for them. I mean, to vote for the Democrats is a vote for people who want to cut your son's little pecker off. People who want to let 50 million illegal immigrants from all the global south, from other civilizations, all come in with no even attempt to try to assimilate them, put them all on welfare, buy them a house across the street from the one that you had to work for. And just, it's insane. The Democrats' war against the American people at this point is so far gone. It's hard to imagine the pendulum swinging back very hard in their favor. But I'll tell you what, though, there's going to be a lot of Republicans stay home, and that's basically the same thing, right? When people are like, I'm seeing a lot of things on Twitter where people are saying that they voted for 3 times, that they fought for him for now. A portion of their lives has been spent dedicated to supporting Trump over 3 elections, and all this time when he was out of power in the Biden years, but still he was a huge part of life and the fight of what was going on in left-right politics and everything during that time. And people go, man, I got fired from my job over this. I lost my mother and father over this. Things like that. And then they're saying, and now you're going to start a war with Iran for Israel, a war that even George W. Bush wasn't stupid enough to get us into. Like, holy crap. And people are really upset about it. So, I don't know, man. I hate to think that the Democrats are going to benefit, but they are.
Impeachment, do you think that some of it will be brought forth if the House flipped? It flips,
I'm
excuse me.
sorry. I'm sorry. Say it again.
Impeachment.
Oh.
Do you think any will be brought forth if the House flipped? And if the Senate also flipped, do you think that it will be shown the way out?
Well, listen, he's not going to be impeached and removed from office for starting a war, because all political parties reserve that power. So they're not going to do that. However, you have baseline type corruption. I don't know where this is going to go, but the headline, at least the other day, was that Pete Hegseth's investment advisor made a bunch of big moves right before the war. And that's the kind of thing where you can get a special counsel investigation going and that kind of deal. He could be, that could be real trouble for him. Donald Trump, I don't know of anything that he's done that's crossing that kind of line this time around. But he does make very bad decisions a lot. Well, in fact, that's not really true, right? Like, there seems to be, I don't know if there's direct connections to his knowledge, but there seems to be a lot of pump and dump going on with the futures markets and the way that he rumors about the war and the way he times his rumor mongering about the war.
There's also Lutnick and the reimbursement of the cancelled duties.
Oh, yeah. And then, his sons are now investors in an Israeli drone company, for God's sake. Can you imagine? So, yeah, I mean, this is like, Teapot Dome scandal or whatever, impeachment scandal level stuff like that. It's that kind of criminality, actual money, that kind of stuff that could get them in trouble. You know what I mean? Starting a secret war against Cambodia, no big deal. Hush money to some CIA guys who broke into the opposition's headquarters. Yeah, that'll get you thrown out of power.
Selling drugs to fund the Contras, no big either.
That's right.
Also selling weapons to Iran under embargo, no big either.
Exactly.
Now, if that's okay with you, I like to go to something totally different, as the Monty Pythons used to say, and discuss a bit libertarianism, because the word libertarian in Europe doesn't mean the same thing than in the US. In Europe, libertarian means you're a bloody anarchist. Yet the American strain of libertarianism is starting to scare the bejesus out of the French establishment, to the point that Emmanuel Macron hired several private intelligence outfits to track and analyze who were those damn people, which kind of adhere a bit to the American way of libertarianism, what they were doing, and who were the networks. And I'm not kidding, this is true. So what is American libertarianism? And please be precise, because otherwise I'm going to call you a libertarian socialist, which is, well, Proudhon. I mean, come on.
Right. Okay. So yeah, let's start with that. Like, the word, I believe, was actually stolen from commies. So the people you're talking about, from like the anarcho-syndicalists.
I mean, it started with Saint-Simon and then Fourier, and the libertarian is Proudhon, first and foremost. So
right. So, I think it was really Murray Rothbard probably who stole the word from the anarcho-syndicalist types here in America. We do have anarcho-communists here in America, as I would call them. So people who, on their idea of the spectrum, they consider themselves to the left of the Marxists and more focused on freedom for people compared to conforming to the top-down rule of the central state or whatever. So they fancy themselves, right, it has liberation or liberty right in the title. And so not just, fairness as administered by the central state overall, like communism or something like that, maybe is supposed to be the distinguishing thing. You might even describe anarcho-syndicalism, or the idea of syndicalism, as basically fascism, really. Like, it has a lot in common with the way Mussolini tried to organize the Italian economy, where you have these syndicates of the workers and the owners and whatever controlling different means of production, which I'm not the greatest expert in, but I think is kind of ironic. Anyway, same thing here in America, where progressivism, aka modern liberalism, is essentially like a soft sort of lowercase f fascism, where, as Robert Higgs calls it, a participatory fascism, right? So we have regular elections and things like that, but we have, as they teach us in government school, a mixed economy, a quasi-free market. And the way that they put it in government school is, of course, that free market economics is wild and crazy and unfair and leads to exploitation and Great Depressions. So you need government to regulate it all, to smooth out the booms and busts, to make sure that everybody's treated fairly, and all of these things. And so, but from an American libertarian perspective, that is all nonsense, right? That essentially progressivism is a right-wing plot by big business because they want, rightly, of course, to stave off actual commie revolution, but they know that they can't just crush the entire left half of the entire political spectrum and forever or whatever. So the smart thing is to just buy them off. You guys want to control the economy, a partially central planned economy. You want to move the financial capital of America from New York to Washington? Okay, bet. Let's do that. Sounds like a good idea. Say all of the big industrialists, because they already won. So they want to organize things their way. And so the American libertarian model is a rejection of all of that and is saying, no, the true American way is, first of all, individual liberty, meaning therefore also and including inherently property rights. And then flowing from that, of course, that's, just as a matter of principle. And also what we've learned is that liberty works and that it's free markets and free floating prices on the market that determine who needs what and how badly when, and gets those things to market most efficiently and provides for the greatest standard of living for the most people. And instead of seeing that all that freedom as chaos that needs to be tamed by the central state, we see all that freedom as the essential productive goodness of everything that happens, and the central state as this giant predatory leech that comes to confiscate the wealth of the productive and give it to the non-productive. And I don't just mean from the rich to the poor. I mean people who are busting their ass.
Libertarian socialists, you just without knowing it, quoted the principle of Proudhon. This is why, it's really funny.
Yeah,
but then again, we need to put back Proudhon.
No, I don't think that's right. And look, I haven't read all the anarcho-commies, but I think this is.
No, but Proudhon, excuse me, Saint-Simon, not Proudhon, Saint-Simon, that was under the old regime. But then again, that was the old regime in France. Where basically the only people paying taxes were the commoners. The church and nobility were not paying taxes, so they were totally unproductive.
Okay, but see, the American libertarian is saying that the poor person who receives welfare, or whatever corporation on the top or whatever person on the bottom is receiving tax money or receiving government favors at the expense of everyone else. They're all on one side. And all the people who are just trying to work for their living in the free market are on the other. I don't think Proudhon agrees with that. That's, the Rothbardian way is essentially everyone keep your hand out of everyone else's pocket. And so that's, and by the way, because socialism doesn't work anyway, right? Like even if we didn't have the world empire, we still can't afford the welfare state. Because you can't just pay people to not produce things at the expense of people who produce things. I actually just saw a thing today where the lady
come to Europe.
I'm sorry?
Oh, yes, come to Europe. I'll show you how it's done.
Exactly.
Tons of unproductive people at the expense of people actually produce stuff.
Exactly. And see, there are these real stark lines. I don't know exactly how it is in France, but like I just saw a thing today where this young lady is saying she can't afford her daughter's health care. And the reason why is because she makes $60,000. Now she made $4,000. Oops. Oh, what did I just do? I'm sorry, man. I might have just. Okay, good. I'm sorry. I just clicked the wrong button here. Let me fix it. So if she only made $4,000, then she would be. Oh, I see. Okay, I think I'm good again. If she only made $40,000, she would be eligible for benefits and the government would help pay her bills. But she makes 60, so she's got to pay everybody else's bills and can't afford to pay her own. And right, so people imagine, oh, income taxation means that the wealthy are soaked to pay for the poor. But no, it's people who are barely making it, paying for people who can't make it without them. And so, but anyway, so that's the difference is essentially American libertarians. That means a lot of us are anarchists. Others of us are for like minimal government. But the point is we are all centered on property rights and free markets. None of this like weird anarcho-syndicalist contraption, which is supposed to somehow escape the forces of prices in the world, and which, American libertarians know better than that. So in other words, American anarchists like Murray Rothbard especially, would criticize the anarcho-communists because they try to like make this distinction between personal property and private property and means of production controls and this and that and whatever. And Murray Rothbard is like, look, man, just call what it is. It's communism, okay? You either have public property or you have private property. And if it's public property, somebody's got to be the ruling committee in charge of deciding how it goes. It can't really be everyone. And so instead, those are the people who ultimately really are the owners and in control now. And so, anarcho-syndicalism or that kind of left libertarianism is all just a fool's errand to American libertarianism. But leftists are right when they say that big business buys off big government and big government then protects big business and breaks markets against everybody else and all that. But they're so wrong saying, so instead the government should just work against those interests for everyone else. No, the government should be severely restricted in its power to help anyone because they don't help. They suck and they end up screwing the many on behalf of people who don't deserve the extra benefit most of the time. And so, and then of course, that's why we're all such great anti-imperialists, because you can have a small government when you have a world empire. You can't have hard money
Obviously.
When you have to be able to print money in order to start a new war. You can't just raise people's taxes. They won't let you start a war if you do that. So you have to just print the money and make them pay later. In unavoidable ways, like the time in the unemployment line when the economy crashes after the bubble pops. And so that's, you can't have, well, you know what, let me boil it down this way for you. What I should have said in the first place is American libertarianism is essentially the Declaration of Independence, pure American freedomism. That's what we're about. And everyone to the left and everyone to the right of us, they're all the deviationists. We're the ones who really believe in liberty. That's it. And you know what? Let me recommend you a great piece by Rothbard called Left and Right, The Prospects for Liberty from 1965. And I think that'll really, I know that really helps blow a lot of people's minds and set them straight on these issues.
Yeah, but I'm very happy that you mentioned the Declaration of Independence because from my side of the pound and from what I know from the U.S., that's exactly how I did consider American libertarians as, well, people, not fundamentalists, definitely not reactionary, but people just being deeply, how can I put it? Not concerned, but deeply committed to going back to the very spirit that made this country. And that was as little federal government as possible.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily state government, local government. We see New Hampshire, for instance, you got pretty weird form of organization. But then again, and most importantly, the freedom to organize the way you want. Saying that there is no constraints imposed solidarity. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, exactly. I heard Noam Chomsky, who's probably America's most famous anarcho-syndicalist, saying that he wants a society with as little coercion as possible for the regular guy, right? So that's the same thing as an American right-wing libertarian wants. It's just that we think that his idea for how to organize something like that doesn't make any sense at all. That, there's always going to be hierarchies, but the thing is, it should be voluntary whether to join them and at what level. rather than being forced to be subjected to other people's decisions. So, I think, basically, there's a real problem with what you guys call liberals is basically libertarians, right? Depending on how strict they are about it.
In France, I mean,
but they have, they have the same problem as American liberals, where a lot of the times they're not socialists. They've made their peace with capitalism, but then in practice that means they made their peace with big business, and now they're on the take. And now it's not really free markets that they're for; it's some companies that they're in bed with, and that's the corruption in it all.
It's called social market economy in Europe, which is European Union, by the way, which is
sounds like corruption to me.
Bullshit. But anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
hey, I'm sorry, man. I have to jump off. I have such a busy day today. I have to go. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Scott.